Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, it's a mailbag episode. We're answering your questions about a lot of different things. Trayce Thompson's name may come up a time or two. We'll talk about the new rules and how they're affecting the game and a lot of other topics that you guys asked about. That's what's on tap. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you can become an everydayer just like we are. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snider. That guy next to me is Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning, or as is the case yesterday and today, weekday afternoon or evening, so that you can listen in the morning if you want to, or you can listen a little bit early because we figure once we've recorded it, might as well put it out for you guys. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And Vince, we've got a lot of good questions from our listeners today. You got anything you want to talk about before we jump into those questions?
No, I think we're good. We can hop right into it.
All right. Yeah. The one thing I thought I might want to bring up isn't specifically Dodgers news, but it's Dodgers adjacent. And we actually had a question about it. Kenley Jansens got his 400th career save on whatever night, Wednesday night for the Red Sox. 350 of those came with the Dodgers, then 41 with the Braves, and now 9 with the Red Sox. And we have a question about that from Saeed XV on Twitter. He asks, it's not a current Dodgers player, but do you think Kenley Jansen has a shot to make the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, having a shot is a definite yes. Is he guaranteed to get in? I don't think so. You're more in tune with Hall of Fame and all the numbers and everything, but just based on, the precedent that's there, Mariano Rivera, Trevor Hoffman, they're in. They're the number 1 and 2, over 600 saves. Lee Smith is in. He's got 478. And then you got K-Rod, John Franco, John Franco's not in. I don't think K-Rod's ever going to get in. And then you got Billy Wagner, who didn't get in, but it was close. And then after that, you got Jansen. And then you got Kimber, who's coming up on 400 saves. So there's a chance for him to do it. And I don't know, he was throwing 99 yesterday. So if he can do that and keep pitching the way he's been pitching for a few more years, he definitely opens up that possibility even a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. That's basically where I'm at. His relief pitchers have a different standard for the Hall of Fame. If you go by wins above replacement or the, traditional comparing him to other positions, no relief pitcher except Mariano Rivera is ever going to deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. But the precedent has been set that relievers are in the Hall of Fame and they are judged differently. And I think that's probably a good thing. But like you said, so Kenley is still behind K-Rod, Franco, and Wagner. Wagner, I think, should be in the Hall of Fame. K-Rod, I don't think there's much of a case there. And John Franco, he never really even got much consideration. And so I feel like Kenley would have to at least pass those 3 guys because the top 3 guys on the saves list, Rivera, Hoffman, and Lee Smith, are all in the Hall of Fame. So if Kenley can pass K-Rod and end up 4th, I think that helps his case. But then you've also got Dennis Eckersley. He's in the Hall of Fame with only 390 saves, although he also had half a career as a good starting pitcher too. And so he's a different case. Jeff Reardon is in with only 367 saves. Maybe Reardon hasn't gotten in. No, he's not. I always get Jeff Reardon and Bruce Sutter mixed up because they both had beards and I was a kid and that's all that I knew. Bruce Sutter's in with only 300 saves. Goose Gossage is in with 310. Raleigh Fingers is in with 341 saves. So Kenley already has more saves than some relievers who are in the Hall of Fame, but all of those guys have like special cases. Goose Gossage was a totally different kind of closer. He was doing 2 or 3 inning saves regularly. Raleigh Fingers is a different case, won a Cy Young Award. Bruce Sutter invented the split finger, or at least perfected it. And so they all have special cases. I feel like Kenley would need to get to at least 450 saves to really have a shot. But like you said, he's hitting 99. Maybe he does have 3 or 4 good years left in him. And, if he got to 500 saves, I think he'd probably be a no-brainer on the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and the way he's talking, obviously he's feeling good right now, but the way he's talking is that he wants to go beyond just his deal that he signed with the Red Sox and move forward. So, congrats to Jansen on the 400, majority of them with the Dodgers, and we'll see him in, I guess, when the Dodgers go over there. So, next question comes from at JSmith0808, and he said, we talked about in a previous episode how Michael Busch could be trade bait, but what realistically do we think Busch could bring back to help the team out this season?
Yeah, I do think Busch's most likely scenario is that he is part of a biggish trade at the trade deadline, depending on what the Dodgers need. And that kind of will depend. I think Busch is a very, very good prospect he could headline a deal. He's not going to headline a deal for Shohei Ohtani, but he could headline a deal for a useful piece. And so really the question becomes, what do the Dodgers want in return? And, if they're looking for a shortstop, Busch could definitely be a big part of a trade for Willy Adames or Tim Anderson. It would take more than that, but Busch could be a headliner or co-headliner on that kind of trade. If they went for an outfielder, it's hard to know who's going to be available. But yeah, I think Busch is a good enough prospect to headline a trade for a very useful piece, but not good enough to get anything done just on his own on a 1-for-1 trade. Those trades are never 1-for-1 when it involves prospects. But yeah, I think Busch, he's got a lot of value.
Yeah, like I said, it's not a 1-for-1. Not necessarily, probably a headliner for sure. And, the talent we're talking about, Tim Anderson, Adames specifically, those are borderline all-star caliber players. I know Anderson has for sure been all-star before. I don't know about Adames, but, they're guys that upgrade the team. And really right now, what they're looking to upgrade would be either a shortstop or a corner outfielder that can hit in general, but hit left-handers, I guess, if you really want to get down into the weeds. There might be a potential for, that they need a starter, or, I don't think he'd be in a deal for a reliever unless maybe a top flight reliever, but even then, probably not. But yeah, I mean, he has value. He's probably going to go down tomorrow and continue to rake in the minor leagues, and that will not hurt his value. It'll, keep his value where it's at. So we'll have to just wait and see what happens. A lot of this is wait and see, but if they do decide to end up keeping him in the majors and give him a little bit of runway, you do risk his value going down a little bit. But if you have plans of him being at least part of the team for the rest of this year and into the next, then you're not really worried about that as the Dodgers.
Yeah, that's always the tricky part is hitting in the majors is harder than hitting in AAA. And so the best thing for his trade value might be going back to AAA, but at least getting some playing time in the big leagues would be nice. Let's take a break. We have several more questions to get to. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Sorare. Our new sponsor, Sorare, is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 MLB teams. Unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, Sorare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards, and there's no cost to play. And there are some pretty epic rewards that you can win. Sorare MLB game weeks happen twice weekly and span a 3 or 4 day cycle. At the end of game weeks, Sorare MLB managers who rank at or near the top of their leaderboards win a variety of rewards, which can include Sorare scarcity cards, game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, and VIP experiences like meeting MLB stars. Prizes may vary depending on the competition. If you've watched any games on MLB TV lately, you've probably seen Sorare commercials that feature Juan Soto and Julio Rodriguez. They're both partnered up with Sorare as brand ambassadors, and they will engage with the Sorare community throughout the season at MLB events. So head to Sorare.com/lockedon That's SORARE.com/lockedon to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today. All right, we are back. We want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. If you are watching on YouTube, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. If you are listening on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you through social media or email. We love hearing from you with your questions for mailbag episodes. We generally do these mailbags pretty much every off day, and a couple of the questions we have today were sent in before we even put out a call for questions. Is people saying, "Hey, for your next mailbag episode, here's a question," and we love that. It's be proactive. We like that. Also, Dodgers are off on Thursday. When I guess we're dropping this episode Thursday afternoon. It's technically Friday's episode, and there is a game on Friday. They start a series with the Padres on Friday evening. If you can't watch the game on TV, you can listen on SiriusXM or on the SXM app. All you got to do is search for Dodgers, and you can also listen to this podcast on the SXM app. Just search for Locked On Dodgers. Our next question, Vince, let's go with JB at JB0123WXYZ. He asks, how much does JD Martinez hinder the lineup flexibility moving forward with only being a DH?
This is something we mentioned on yesterday's episode of, him coming back is a good thing if he's hitting, but you lose some of the ability with the guys they have in the lineup now. We talked about trying not to get Rojas and Barnes in too many of the same lineups yesterday, and we talked about how Barnes and Rojas were in the same lineup yesterday, and the Dodgers scored 8 runs. But one of those runs was from Will Smith, who hit a home run, who was only in there because he was at DH. So you lose the ability for that. If Martinez is hitting, then it's not going to really matter because he would be in the lineup every day regardless. And that's the reality of the situation. But if he's not hitting, that's kind of where, it's not that hard to sit him or not. But yeah, it hinders it because you can't get Smith in the DH on days he's not catching. You can't move, Max Muncy around in order to get, whoever else, like this, say if it was Michael Busch that stays on, or you can't move other guys around to get your maximized lineup maybe sometimes, and that's where it hinders it. But like I said, if JD Martinez is hitting, then it wouldn't matter anyways because he would be in the lineup regardless.
Yeah, for me, the only real concern is Will Smith. I think everybody else, it's days off are good for everybody, but catcher is where it's most important, and catchers need more days off. So Max Muncy taking, 10 days off during the season, it's obviously you'd love to have Muncy's bat in there, but it's not the end of the world for him to take a day off. But a catcher needs 30 days off, 30 or 40 days off from playing catcher. And it would be nice if most of those we could keep Smith's bat in the lineup. And yeah, like you said, we talked about yesterday that I think the Dodgers are going to have to adjust their JD Martinez approach a little bit and say, look, when Will Smith isn't catching, he's going to DH a lot of the time. And that will just mean JD coming off the bench in that game. And, one point I made yesterday again is that with this back issues generally linger a little bit. And JD Martinez isn't exactly a young buck. And so it's probably not a bad idea to give him a few more days off than they were planning anyway. If he went down with a back injury as a DH, which is the least demanding position on the field, chances are he's going to need more days off anyway. And I think they just need to prioritize, okay, every time JD Martinez isn't in the lineup, Will Smith is DHing, and basically let JD's days off dictate when Austin Barnes gets to catch. Don't worry about who's pitching or whatever. Okay, JD Martinez needs a day. All right, Smith, you're DHing, Barnes, you're catching, and let those three kind of be in a 3-man platoon.
Yeah, and Mookie,
except never Barnes at DH, because DH stands for designated hitter, and Austin Barnes shouldn't be doing anything with the word hitter in it.
Yeah, that's true. Unless Blake Snell's on the mound.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. We got a couple from our buddy Kevin, but we'll go with the first one here. Kevin at Blue Goon 82 says Jonny DeLuca is on the 40-man, off to a great start in Double-A, especially his numbers versus lefties, over 1,000 OPS last season and so far this season. What are the odds of him getting called up anytime soon, especially with Trayce Thompson's struggles?
Yeah, I've been thinking about Jonny DeLuca a lot lately, because basically it boils down to when are they going to give up on Trayce Thompson? Because as long as Trayce Thompson is on the roster, he's gonna keep getting to play against lefties. But as soon as they do give up on Trayce, I think DeLuca is a reasonable option because he is hitting lefties. He's not a top prospect who you worry too much about. Uh, like you don't want to call up a guy just to sit him on the bench most of the time. But DeLuca is a guy who his role is probably going to be a platoon outfielder anyway, going forward. And if he can match lefties, call him up and say, look, you are replacing Trayce Thompson, which means you are starting almost every time a lefty is on the mound. That's your role. You'll pinch hit against lefty relievers once in a while. That's going to be your role. And yeah, I think DeLuca, he's only in AA, but the Dodgers in the past have sometimes not even sent their top prospects to AAA just because the PCL can be so weird. It can be hard on pitchers. It can mess with hitters because, there's the ball flies better in the PCL in a lot of those stadiums. And so you don't want to get hitters into bad habits of swinging for the fences. You don't want to get pitchers, their morale low. And so not as much lately, but back, 8 or 10 years ago, the Dodgers often weren't even sending their top prospects to AAA. They're just going straight from AA to the big leagues. I think DeLuca could do the same thing. And, while yesterday I said Trayce Thompson has to get better just because it's impossible to stay as bad as he's been for very long. The fact is, I think it's safe to say that Jonny DeLuca right now could not be worse than Trayce Thompson has been the last month. And so doesn't mean that he would be better than Trayce Thompson is likely to be in the next month, but I think you can make a case for that too. So yeah, because he's on the 40-man roster, really, as soon as they cut bait with Thompson, if it's not for a trade, I think DeLuca is a very reasonable option to get called up.
Yeah, and at the very least, usually about a month in to the season is when you see guys start moving up and down, or usually more up in the minor leagues. So DeLuca could very well be with OKC here in the next week or so, or a couple weeks, if they feel like that's the progressive step towards joining the Dodgers. Like you mentioned, Dodgers used to do it a little bit more. I believe like Grove last year was the first one in the Friedman era to not pitch in, or to, I don't know if it was just pitcher or any player, but not be in AAA before coming up, going straight from AA. So it's been a while for it. We've seen them always, progressively move guys up. I think I saw a couple pitchers already move up in the Dodger system. So we very well could see him move up. And if we do see him move up, that means that they're thinking about him for this season and being on the Dodgers, or potentially being on the Dodgers roster. And as always, a lot of these guys are usually an injury away from finding their way back or onto a roster. Now, obviously, there's a couple guys ahead of him, but not necessarily any outfielders. It's Yanni Hernandez. I think Luke Williams is still on the 40, but those guys aren't outfielders. And obviously, yes, they play infield, which could make, Chris Taylor more of an outfielder, and then you solve it that way. But either way, I think what we see the next month, 3 weeks or so, DeLuca moving up, I think that'll mean that they have thoughts of him coming onto the roster.
Yeah. And the only other outfielder is Andy Pazs, who's on the 40-man roster. He's another guy, righty, who theoretically at least matches lefties. He is 2 years younger than DeLuca, 2.5 years younger, and he's probably more of a prospect. Pazs is another guy in the Bush category who I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him involved in trades this trade deadline. So maybe he's less likely to get called up right now, unless it was for some kind of showcase. But I think they probably want Pazs getting at bats every day for trade value reasons, if nothing else. Let's take another break. We have a few more questions to get to. I'm going to talk about the rule changes and a little bit more about Trayce Thompson. That name keeps coming up. So thanks again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. As you guys know, I went to the Dodgers-Phillies game last Wednesday, and I got my ticket on Gametime because if you're on YouTube, you can see on the screen, you use code Locked On MLB and you get $20 off your first purchase. That's what I did. I bought a ticket and I got $20 off because I used code Locked On MLB, and I was pleasantly not surprised because I expected it, but because I've read this ad. But I did find the lowest price there on Gametime, and you know that there's a lot of different places you can buy tickets, and they all have their different selling points. For me, can I pay the least money is what I'm looking for, and Gametime guarantees that. So if you buy your ticket on Gametime and you find tickets in the same section and row for less on another marketplace, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So there's no risk. Buy it on Gametime, use the code, and you will get $20 off. So snag tickets without stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account or redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back. We want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. And we want to remind you again, Friday's game, series opener against the Padres, just like every Dodger game, you can find it on SiriusXM or on the SXM app. You can listen to the hometown broadcast. I watched Wednesday's game on TV, but I did watch the recap later on the MLB app on my Apple TV because I love watching recaps of games I've already watched when it's the Dodgers. And one of the fun things about those recaps is you get different announcers on the different plays. And I got to hear Tim Neverrett's calls of the home runs. Tim Neverett is a very good radio broadcaster. I think he mostly does the road games. It's probably Charlie Steiner for these home games. But Neverett, definitely when the Dodgers are on the road, you want to check out the game on the SXM app. He's very good at describing what's happening, doing it quickly so you can really get a visual and see the game in your mind. And you can do all that on the SXM app. Just search for Locked On Dodgers. All right. You want to do our next question, Vince?
Yep. We had one from Doug Reynolds at CRCL 805. He asked about the rule changes. He said he'd love to get your take, or our take, but your take on the new rules this year and maybe some stats on how they have changed or not changed game results. 38 games in seems like a decent sample size. And Jeff, you're a resident statistician on this podcast. So that's right up your alley.
Yeah. So there were 3 rule changes. Obviously, there's the pitch clock, there's the banning of the shift, and there's the bigger bases. I guess the pickoff limits is part of the pitch clock. So 3.5 new rules, I guess. And there's a few things that those are designed to do. The pitch clock obviously was designed to speed up the game, to get rid of dead time and just focus our baseball time into a smaller amount of time. And that has been an unequivocal success. If you don't like the pitch clock, it's because you didn't like the goal of making the games go faster. Because the goal to make games go faster has been entirely successful. The Dodgers, I think, have only had 2 games that went over 3 hours this year. I only remember 2 anyway, and it definitely hasn't been much more than that. We talked yesterday about how the series finale with the Brewers, with Wade Miley and Clayton Kershaw pitching, who both work quickly anyway, 2 hours and 11 minutes with 9 runs scored. It was magical. I love this pace of baseball. I was a big fan of the idea of the pitch clock, and it has worked exactly the way the league wanted it to. There's been a few hiccups. There's pitch clock violations, which means that balls and strikes are getting called without pitches being thrown, and that bothers some people. The Dodgers have been the most successful team at not getting violations called. The Dodgers have only had 7 total violations called this year, 4 on their pitchers, and then 1 or 2 batter timeout violations and 2 batter pitch time violations and 1 batter timeout violation, which I assume just means a batter calling a timeout when he didn't have one available. I almost remember who that was. I can't remember, but Dodgers only have 7. Compare that to the Angels have the most in baseball. They have 18 violations, which have cost them a total of 1.1 runs by however that's calculated. The Dodgers, their violations cost them 0.1 runs. That's the lowest in baseball by quite a bit. The next lowest is 0.3. So, and the Dodgers have overall been very, very good at mastering this. And so it's a good rule that is having the intended effects. And the Dodgers have been the best in baseball at not being negatively affected. So that's good. As for the pickoff limits and the bigger bases, both of those were designed to increase the running game. And we're definitely seeing that. Stolen bases are up. They're the highest they've been since 1999. It's 0.7 stolen bases per team per game compared to 0.51 last year. So that means, basically a 33% increase, which is huge. Caught stealings are at about the same level they've been. And so you're getting a higher stolen base percentage, more stolen bases, more action on the bases, and more runs scored. Or runs scored per game are up by 0.3 runs per team per game over last year, which last year they were way down, but we're back up. Basically, we're almost back up to like parts of the steroid era as far as runs per game. And it's not necessarily just home runs. Home runs are up for sure, but so are singles and doubles. Now, doubles aren't up. No, singles and doubles are up. Triples aren't up. Home runs are up a little bit. So the one other thing that they had hoped all this stuff to do, pitch clock and everything would increase the number of balls in play. That hasn't necessarily happened. Strikeout rate hasn't gone down. It's gone up from last year, and it's basically running even with the couple of years before that. So strikeout rate hasn't really changed much. Overall batting average has gone up some, but not a ton. But batting average is also usually lower early in the season. And so I think year over year from this point in a season, I think the batting average is up more than it looks like it is. And so as the season goes on, I expect that we will see that batting average rise a little bit, and just stopping it continuing to go down is a good thing. So overall, it seems like the rules have been pretty successful at what they tried to do. And I don't really have any complaints. And I feel like the violations have gone down over time too, as players get more used to it. And so it's almost a non-issue these days. We're a month and a half into the season, and we're already to the point where we don't really think about the pitch clock that often, which I think is great.
Yeah, we talked about this a month ago, or a little over a month ago, before the season started, when all the pitch clock violation, or even at the start of spring, I think, when all the pitch clock violations were going on. And I said, we'll be a month into the season and nobody's going to even notice the pitch clock anymore, other than the fact, and even then, the occasional times it's happened, it hasn't affected a game yet. When it affects a game, that's probably the next big time we'll talk about it. The other thing that I saw in Ken Rosenthal article this morning on big innings. So it said through Monday, there had been 199 instances of a pitcher allowing 4 or more runs in a single inning, about 2.12% of all innings pitched. At that rate, if it continues on, there'll be 100 more such innings than there were last season. So about basically 1 every 2 days. So when you are a pitcher, you can't slow the game down when the game is getting on top of you. That's kind of the result.
Yeah. And offense is fun. Offense is exciting. Home runs are fun, but this is most big innings. It's not, home run after home run. Big innings almost by necessity have to have, other than the 4+1 game and, the absolute madness game, most big innings involve singles. There's usually a home run involved, but it's usually singles and doubles and stringing together hits. And that's a fun brand of baseball for sure. All right. Our last question comes from Corey Shadid at the Grizzly Bear 0 on Twitter. What are the odds of pairing Trayce Thompson and a prospect, or maybe JD Martinez, for a trade for someone we could use? Without JD, we could keep a good bat in the lineup at DH when somebody needs a day off. So this kind of ties together a few things we talked about, but this specifically is asking is basically rephrasing, does Trayce Thompson have any trade value?
Yeah. Yeah. If you're gonna pair Trayce Thompson with a prospect, you might be lowering your value of that prospect just at the way Trayce has been playing. Not a knock on like we said, nothing to knock on him personally. That's just how the way it is. And realistically, if it comes to that point, Trayce Thompson would get DFA'd. The only way he would get traded is if somebody wants to claim him before he clears waivers and the Dodgers make a small trade. And if they did, it would be for, well, what they may think is an insignificant prospect, but as we were learning with River Ryan and the prospect, the guy the Dodgers got from the Padres from Matt Beatty, maybe they're not always insignificant prospects when it comes to the Dodgers. But regardless, Trayce Thompson, I don't see him getting traded. I don't think there's a team that, is like, oh, and unless it's like, oh, just throw Trayce Thompson in the deal. Why not? Like that would literally be the reason why. But yeah, prospect for a bat is obviously one. JD Martinez, again, doesn't have much trade value. And like, even if he's hitting really good, then he has trade value, but then the Dodgers have no reason to trade him. And if he's not hitting well, he has no trade value, and he's an old aging slugger on a 1-year deal. And maybe someone thinks they could turn him around, but again, it would be for like a flyer reliever or a flyer infield outfield guy, like nobody of value. So if the Dodgers are going to give value to help their team this year, it's going to come from prospects, and that's what basically that's what it's going to come down to. And it goes back to like the Michael Busch conversation at the start of this of what could the Dodgers go after, and what the Dodgers can go after is a corner outfielder or any outfielder, I guess, that can hit very well, or a shortstop that can be an everyday shortstop.
Yeah, the two arguments I could see in favor of a team wanting to trade for Trayce Thompson is he does play good defense. And actually 3 arguments. He plays good defense. He doesn't make very much money. And you could make a case that he has been poorly utilized by the Dodgers this year. The fact that he is platooning and basically only facing left-handed pitchers when we have a couple years of data saying that he can't hit left-handed pitchers. That's not a criticism of the Dodgers. I understand why they're doing that, because he's not the best option against right-handed pitchers either. And so it's basically, hey, look, Trayce, here's a chance to earn a roster spot. But I could see another team saying, hey, we actually need an outfielder who can hit righties and play good defense and doesn't make much money. Well, Trayce Thompson definitely fits the bill on 2 of those. And I could see a team having hope that he fits that third bill of can hit righties, because he did hit righties last year. He hasn't really hit much of anybody this year. But, I could see it happening. And like you said, the Dodgers, most likely they DFA him, but at what he's making, I wouldn't be surprised if he got claimed and they either, made a trade or did let him go. But it's, I feel bad because I love Trayce Thompson, but it's just hard to see him fitting on this team much longer.
Yep.
I think that's all our questions. If we
have
didn't get
one more, but it's an injury update question from our buddy Kevin on Reyes, Hudson, and Fireisen, I believe. Last I went back and looked, I don't think we had an update on any of them recently, so they're all kind of still on track to whenever they were originally planned to come back.
Yeah, so theoretically they'll all be back at some point this year, but I did see it's been a couple of weeks, but Hudson I felt like was progressing slower than they expected, but they were already kind of not expecting him for a while. It's kind of, I don't know. I'd be surprised if we see Daniel Hudson again, honestly. But I said the same thing about Hyun-Jin Ryu back in 2016, I think, and he ended up being okay. So who knows? But yeah, no real updates on those guys. That's going to do it for us for today and for this week. Again, we will be dropping this episode on Thursday afternoon instead of Friday morning. Hope that doesn't mess up anybody's schedules. You can still listen to it Friday morning on your way to work if that's what you like to do. But we figure since we're recording this during the day, we might as well drop it for you. So if it's easier for you to listen to on Thursday evening, that works too. Or you could watch it on YouTube on Thursday evening and then listen to it on your way to work. Everybody wins, especially us. But we want to thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Want to remind you to check out the Dodgers on SiriusXM and the SXM app just by searching for Dodgers. Anytime you want the hometown broadcast and can't be in front of your TV, it's a great option for listening to the Dodgers. It's also a great option for listening to this podcast just by searching for Locked On Dodgers. If you're not a member of our Everydayer Club, it's a real easy club to join. All you got to do is watch or listen every day, and then you're in the club. And every day doesn't have to mean like every day, but, do your best. We're here every day. You might as well be too. It's fun. If you have friends or family who love the Dodgers like you do, please tell them about the show. Maybe they'll become everydayers too. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSense91. I am on Twitter at Snydog, and the DMs are open in all those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com. And our phone number for voicemails or text messages is 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you on Monday.
Have a good one.